I think it's a understatement when I say that Battle Cats has many units. Normally, it isn't abnormal for a gacha game to have at least over 100 different units, but in Battle Cat's case, there's over 700. Most of the units have differing stats that allows them to be placed into distinct roles, which allows for a variety of strategies to be made for specific stages. Legend rares especially is a prominent example of this. Nearly all of them are made to fulfill a specific niche or purpose, while not being able to fulfill other roles nearly as well. There is of course exceptions to this, but for this video we're just gonna focus on one legend rare specifically, Pandora. If it isn't obvious enough by the title of this video, I really like Pandora. Pandora as a legend rare does have a niche role, but the way Pandora is designed to fulfill that role is just so masterfully done in my opinion. As for the reason why, we're going to get into that. In order to establish good design, we need to delve into legend rares. Legend rares are a rarity from the rare capsule that has the lowest chance of dropping out of all the other rarities. Each set usually has a legend rare exclusive to it. The defining traits of legend rares is that they're usually built to be particularly effective at a certain role or niche. Usually, legend rares are made to counter 1 to 3 traits specifically, therefore for a legend rare to be considered good, they don't have to be the best generalist. All they need to do is excel against the traits they're meant to counter or in the role they're meant to fulfill. Legend rares being somewhat niche yet excelling at the niche they're meant to fulfill is essentially what separates legend rares from other rarities. This trait is shared among most legend rares. In other words, most legend rares are designed as extremely strong specialist units. So in order for a legend rare to be considered well designed, they need to offer something that makes them worth using in their niche. With that established, let's now talk about Pandora. Pandora is the legend rare exclusive to the set Iron Legion. The set is themed around giant war machines, with each of them having some sort of anti-zombie capability. Since anti-zombie is the main theme of this set, then it is logical that the legend rare of this set would be specifically built to counter zombie enemies. To explain what makes an anti-zombie unit good, we need to delve into the zombie trait itself. So the zombie trait has two prominent features that is present in the majority of zombie enemies: burrowing and revive. Burrowing allows for certain zombie enemies to burrow underground, becoming untargetable while doing so. After traveling a certain distance, the zombie enemy will resurface and become targetable again. The distance of the burrowing and the number of times the ability can occur all varies from enemy to enemy. Burrowing as an ability itself is often considered the most dangerous trait of zombie enemies, as it can easily disrupt the flow of your strategy and lineup by directly attacking your backline. The other prominent feature of the zombie trait is revive. After a zombie enemy with revive is killed, it will leave behind a pile of bones. After a certain amount of time, the pile of bones would revive back into the zombie enemy that left it behind, usually with a reduced HP. The time it takes to revive and the number of times the enemy can revive and the HP percent the enemies will be at when revived all depends on the type of enemy. The bones the enemies leave behind cannot be targeted by any units except for ones with the Soul Strike ability. This ability can also be prevented from activation if you kill the enemy with a unit that possesses the zombie killer ability. So in short, the main two abilities of a zombie is burrowing and reviving, and a unit need to somehow counteract these abilities to be considered a decent anti-zombie unit. Now, let's take a look at Pandora itself. Pandora possesses a rather high base HP of 153,000, 6,300 DPS, and 400 range. However, the most unique base stat of Pandora is its movement speed of 1. That is the minimal movement speed a unit can have in the game without being completely immobile. Besides that, Pandora also possesses tough and insane damage against zombies, essentially quintupling his HP and sextupling his DPS against them, assuming that you have all the fruit treasures. Besides the insane stats Pandora offers against zombies, Pandora also has Zombie Killer and Omni Strike, allowing his attack to stretch 450 range behind him. Pandora also has Wave Blocker as an ability, which frankly is a bit weird since zombie enemies are rarely associated with waves, but we'll get into that later. So essentially, Pandora is a legend rare that has decent base stats, insane stats against zombies, Omni Strike, Zombie Killer, and Wave Shield. Now that we've covered the basics, let's get into the specifics and pick apart Pandora's kit. Pandora itself is rather unique in terms of anti-zombie units. To understand what that means, we need to explore some of the other anti-zombie units first. Let's take Wushu and Cadaver Bear as an example. Wushu is a semi-spammable anti-zombie tanker that specializes in soaking damage from zombie enemies. His kit, while not directly made to counter the two abilities the zombie trait is known for, still works immensely well against both Burrowing and Revive. Due to the nature of his spam ability, it's always guaranteed that a few Wushu will still be in a backline to tank for burrowing or reviving zombie enemies. Cadaver Bear is basically identical. He doesn't have any direct counter to zombie abilities, but his spam ability allows him to indirectly counter most burrowing or reviving zombie enemies by hitting them with his insane damage per hit. Good anti-zombie units are usually built more defensively since that is the best way to counter both main abilities of zombie enemies. What separates Pandora from most anti-zombie units, however, is that Pandora is built extremely defensively. Pandora has a movement speed of 1, which, as I said before, is the slowest a unit can move without being completely immobile. Speed stats in units are actually pretty weird. Speed may not seem like an important stat to consider, but oftentimes it's the speed that defines a unit's role. It's actually an extremely advanced topic that will require another video to fully explain, but for now let's just say that some units are better with high speed and some with low speeds. In Pandora's case, its extremely slow movement speed actually works in favor of Pandora's Niche. Because of Pandora having a slow movement speed, it allows Pandora to stay near the base, which ensures its safety from almost all ambushing zombies. This allows Pandora to have a very specific yet extremely effective niche that isn't as well covered by other units. Since most stages containing zombie enemies uses them as a tool to ambush your backline, having Pandora, who is one of the best at defending said backline, is extremely valuable. So Pandora having 1 speed is actually extremely important for Pandora itself, as it allows them to fulfill a role more effectively than other units. And even if a zombie somehow manages to get past Pandora, its Omni stretches pretty far back, which allows for sniping of zombie enemies that gets behind Pandora. Essentially, Pandora completely shuts down the most dangerous abilities of zombie enemies, solidifying itself as one of the best anti-zombie specialist unit. Pandora, however, isn't just effective against ambushing zombie enemies, it is also a very efficient zombie killing machine in general. If you take a look at the list of zombie enemies that is currently present in the game, you'll notice that almost all common zombie enemies gets outranged by Pandora. This is because zombies as a trait mostly relies on ambushing instead of things like massive range in order to be a threat. The only common zombie enemy that outranges or can reach Pandora is Zamel, and even then it can't really do anything to Pandora due to Pandora's massive effective HP. If you manage to make a setup that allows Pandora to reach a zombie enemy, he would absolutely shred them. This also applies to advent bosses. Pandora's massive damage against zombie types is meant to play into its defensive niche, but if you manage to set it up in a way that allows you to use it offensively, it will be an extremely valuable tool in your lineup. From what I know, the only time where Pandora would struggle against zombies is Big Peng Z, who has a strong toxic attack that ignores Pandora's effective HP. Pandora also isn't as effective against Dabu and Ziwano due to the non-zombie peons blocking Pandora from reaching them in their respective stages, but otherwise Pandora is an absolute unit against zombie types. Of course, that isn't to say Pandora doesn't have weaknesses. Pandora doesn't really have any stat immunities to protect itself. That makes Pandora susceptible to stat debuffs such as knockback and curse, which diminishes its usability in some stages. This weakness isn't too big of a deal, as Pandora usually stays close to the base where most enemies except zombies can't easily reach it, but you would need to play with this weakness in mind for some stages. So to summarize, Pandora is built in a way that best counters the main abilities of zombie enemies while also fulfilling the niche in a unique way. In terms of legend rare, this is one of the best ways you could have gone in terms of game design, since it allows Pandora to effectively counter zombies without clashing with other anti-zombie units. So we've already established that Pandora's main niche is an anti-zombie base defender that is extremely effective at doing its job, but Pandora has an additional ability that allows it to fulfill another niche, Wave Shield. As implied by the name, Wave Shield cancels out any incoming wave attack and prevents them from damaging the unit and anything behind said unit. Pandora does have rather high range for a ranged wave blocker, but it still works well as its range is still short enough to cancel out the first waves enemies produce, essentially nullifying enemies' wave ability completely. Pandora is a bit restricted compared to other ranged wave shielders though, as its slow movement speed doesn't allow it to get to the front lines fast enough. You usually have to play around this weakness weakness by luring enemies close to your base so that Pandora's wave shield can work properly. This means that Pandora is slightly less effective than other ranged wave shielder, as the other ones don't usually require hyper-specific setups to work properly, but that doesn't mean that Pandora sucks at the role. At the end of the day, Pandora is still a ranged wave shielder, a role that is still highly sought after due to its ability to completely shut down wave-based stages. Bringing Pandora as the sole anti-wave unit on wave stages would usually still work as long as you learn to play around the limitations of Pandora. Pandora's slightly higher range also makes it a bit harder to kill than other ranged wave shielder, but this difference is usually minuscule and therefore not as important as you might think. Most enemies that produces wave attacks has short range, so there isn't that many situations where Pandora's range advantage would come in handy. This slight advantage is also offset by the fact that Pandora cannot reposition due to its knockback count of 1, unless the enemies have knockback or warp. So at the end of the day, this advantage isn't actually an advantage at all. Also, a weakness that should be noted is there's a good chance your attackers will be vulnerable to wave attacks when they knock the wave enemies back due to Pandora's slow movement speed not allowing it to catch up immediately. This weakness is the result of both Pandora's slow movement speed and its high standing range for a wave shielder. Regardless, Pandora still works well as a wave shielder, albeit with some restrictions that you should keep in mind. As the second legend rare I've ever gotten on this account, Pandora holds a rather special place in my heart. Unlike most other legend rares whose niche is already covered by other units, Pandora has traits that separate it from other units of similar niche. Besides Inazagi, Pandora is the only other legend rare that I actively use in serious strategies. Pandora is definitely somewhat situational but works phenomenally in situations that it was designed for. The fact that Pandora, a unit added all the way back in version 8.4, is still considered a contender for one of the best anti-zombie unit even without Soul Strike is just a testament to how well Ponos designed this unit. It countered a trait that is meant to counter with some additional niche and usage without breaking the game in an unhealthy way. As a side note, Pandora isn't completely useless as a generalist unit. It's usable as an emergency backline tanker due to its high base HP and decent DPS. It isn't that practical in most stages, but it's definitely usable as a generalist unit if you really want to use it in that way. Overall, Pandora is just a really good unit that is arguably the best in its niche. You really can't ask for much more than that when it comes to legend rares. I think I've said enough at this point. Thank you all so much for watching this video and have a nice day.